Akko the Jester Chapter 1. Located in West England is a school dedicated to teaching young witches the art of magic known as Lunanova Magical Academy. The school was founded in the 15th century by the Grade 9 Old Witches, which has a history of 1600 years. Lunanova originally only accepted witches from magical families, but eventually, it also accepted witches without magical inheritance due to economic difficulties. One of the students attending in this present day is Atsuko Kaguri, or Akko for short, an excitable and optimistic 16-year-old girl from Japan. She has no magical inheritance herself but has dreamed of becoming a witch anyway after seeing her idol, Shining Chariot, perform a magic show one night when she was little. She got accepted into Lunanova years later, which, after an eventual first day, has loved since. Even if she lacked any magic and often caused trouble for herself and others, she had a strong heart and never gave up despite the frustrations she had to deal with on this particular day. She and her two friends whom she shared a room with, Lottie Jansen, a girl from Finland, and Susie Manbavaran, a girl from Southeast Asia, were walking around the town known as Glastonbury, after a busy school day aiming to buy equipment for future lessons. Lottie was a calm and kind-hearted person who could be quite timid and shy at times. She would often try to be the voice of reason when things would ever get hairy. Susie, however, was the total opposite. She was calm but also rather sarcastic a lot of the time and sometimes sadistic. She'd be indifferent in various situations that would drive others mad, showing her to be the calmest of this group. But the three of them all remained good friends despite their differences. All we need now are a few bits of stationery and we should be all done, Lottie said, seeing that Akko and Susie just wanted to be done already and have fun at last. Akko replied with a tired yawn, as boring as this has been, I suppose getting all of this done now means we have more time to do what we want. You two can do whatever around here, said Susie, but I'm heading back to our room after this. My mushrooms are calling to me. Well, that's fine. Don't stick around, if you'd rather not. What are you gonna do, Akko? Lottie asked, wondering if she should stick around with her. If Susie was leaving shortly, probably just browse a little. See what catches my attention, she replied casually, not looking so tired anymore, now that she could do what she wanted. I have some spare money left and I don't feel ready to return yet. Then I'll leave first once this is over, Susie announced. Akko was still unable to fly on a broom and thus had to ride on Lottie's whilst she flew for them. Susie wouldn't want to have to wait for Akko to be done. The more she thought about wanting to get back to potion making. You don't want to window shop with us? Akko asked, turning around to face her. I'm not so sure if I want to either, Lottie said nervously. I'd like to continue with the current chapter of Nightfall I am reading, as there's some time to do so this evening and I'm near the end of it. I'm sorry, Akko, I shouldn't have said that out loud. It's okay, she replied back with a smile. I'll be as quick as I can. Once we finish getting the rest of the stationery we need, we could always meet up at a designated spot and head back to the dorm right after. Would 15 minutes be okay? Is that enough time for you to window shop? Lottie asked with doubt. The Akko would be back on time. Not a problem for me. When I have you two waiting for me on my mind, then I suppose I wouldn't mind that. But I could always wait a little longer for you, if I like. I'm just acting impatient at school. I know, that book series means a lot to you. Thanks, Akko, Lottie said, still feeling somewhat rude for saying what she said. Guess I'll wait then too, Susie said with her causally dry tone. Might as well, if you plan to be quick. Thanks, guys, Akko said with a bigger smile. I know I can be a liability with not being able to fly on and broom and all, so I promise to be as quick as I can. You aren't a liability at all, Lottie said, trying to make Akko feel good about herself. Don't worry about it. I'll keep trying my best to make sure that won't ever happen. With her optimism still in check, Akko continued her walk. Others to get their final supplies before eventually splitting off. Not wanting to go against her time limit, she soon dashed on in somewhat of a hurry by power walking across the town. Having passed by the regular places around town, Akko found herself not entering one store so far, as she continued to think about what to spend her money on. Despite some of the nice things on display in store windows, nothing had yet enticed her to walk into any of them yet. Perhaps she thought it was constantly reminding herself not to take too long for the sake of her friends. Maybe I'll just buy a chocolate bar or something. I'm kind of hungry. Walking into a candy store, she browsed for anything small she could purchase for herself and the others as a way of thanking them for waiting for her. Just as she was about to pick up something, she noticed a clock on the wall in the corner of her eye. Realizing she had no watch on her to check on the time, she gasped upon realizing that the time was 2 minutes away from the meet-up time to get back to the others. Oh, she cried, dropping the chocolate bar. I better get back. Forget the chocolate. Akko darted out of the store and, without realizing it, left in the opposite direction. She walked down, thinking she was going the right way. Turning to her left and stopping by a quiet part of the street to figure out where she was, a figure covered in a purple cloak that covered the face was watching her run. Upon closer inspection of Akko, the figure smiled and called out to her. Are you lost? Asked the young-sounding female voice. Akko turned to face this cloaked person and questioned her appearance. What's up with that person? You seem to be looking back and forth there. Are you in need of any directions? Well, Akko felt somewhat nervous about talking back to someone who would hide their appearance. I can help you, if you like. There's a shortcut through this little store of mine that's you're from Luna Nova, correct? The figure asked, which got Akko's attention. You know about it? She asked curiously. Yet who doesn't around these parts? All the things I've heard about it sound really fascinating. Akko was surprised to hear anyone from around these parts praise the school. The reputation of witches from the general public was mostly negative, which always rubbed her the wrong way. She wanted to someday change that and show people just how great witches were, just like shiny chariots. Oh, it is, Akko said, raising her voice with an injection of enthusiasm. Becoming a witch is something I've dreamed of ever since I saw Shiny Chariot's show, I want to do my best and make everyone happy no matter how much I struggle with not having a magical background. If I believe hard enough, I'll get there. Like Shiny Chariot said, a believing heart is your magic. That's a good goal to have, the hooded lady agreed. You say that you lack any magical background. Yes. Well, yet I do, she said, trying not to get too down about it. I struggle a lot in class to get any magic right, yet you still wanted to join Luna Nova anyway, the figure asked, growing more fascinated with this girl. Of course I did. So what, if I struggle with magic? That won't stop me from making my dream come true. I admire that the figure smiled under her hood. Always good to have a positive outlook. What's your name? Etsuko Kaguri, she replied in a friendly manner, but you can just call me Akko. A pleasure to meet you, Akko. If you don't mind me asking, Akko said, wanting to address something. Since the conversation started, is there a reason you wear a cloak? Oh, this, the figure said, it's just that I feel more comfortable with it. It was passed down in the family and I always keep it with me. I see, Akko replied, who was now starting to feel a bit more comfortable around her. So can you pull off any magic spells effectively yet? Asked the cloaked figure. It's okay if you can't, considering your background. Well, I'm working on one really hard every day, which is the transformation spell, Akko explained, thinking back on all her training sessions at nights. My magic astrology teacher, Ursula Callistus. Out with it. She's super with it. Helping me out with it. She's super nice and supportive of me. This immediately caught the cloaked figure's attention, as Akko continued to talk about the kind of animals she could turn herself into so far. She waited for Akko to finish talking and quickly changed the subject. May I show you something before you go? The figure asked, looking towards a quiet little store that looked to have seen better days. I think I may have something to help you. Something to help me? Wait, she thought about everything she had explained earlier and something came to mind. Follow me, the figure said, walking on ahead. Akko had long forgotten about getting back to the others at this point, as she simply had to see what this person was talking about. As she followed her inside, all that echoed in her mind was, is she able to help me with my magic? The inside of the store looked far more run down than the outside. The shelves had practically nothing on them rather than a few worn-out books and a shocking amount of dust. A table with a cashier was placed near the door leading to the stock room. Nothing else was to be seen, which gave Akko a somewhat sad impression of the place. This store seems empty, the cloaked lady asked. Well, yes, it's not had anything in a long time, yet you still come in here. It's special to me. It may get lonely here sometimes and nobody ever comes in, but it feels homey, you know? I see. So what was this thing you wanted to show me? She asked, cutting to the chase. It's just under here, the hooded figure said, arriving at the front desk and opening up the drawer on the right side. Akko stood by the customer side of the cashier and watched as the figure brought out what looked to be a red and yellow colored ring. It was a rather fancy-looking item that looked like it could go for a lot of cash, If so, this akko, the hooded figure said with a confident tone, this will bring you good luck. A good luck ring? Akko questioned, now thinking this was one of those typical items people would sell that didn't really do anything. One to help those such as yourself. This is just what you need to give you the luck. You've always deserved the luck. I've always deserved. Echoes of the countless times Akko had failed in class, been the cause of trouble in classes, being brought down by one of the school's best students, Diana Cavendish. All of those feelings came piling up. She'd always tell herself to never give up despite the hurdles in her life. But right now that wasn't the prime focus, as the emotions of her failures all piling up made her come to a quick decision. This could really work? Akko asked, as her eyes were beginning to light up with excitement. I've no doubt about it, the hooded figure replied. Why don't you try it on? Offering the ring to the excitable girl, Akko immediately put it through her right index finger, which fit like a charm. She gazed upon the ring and smiled happily, feeling that suited her well. I love it, she exclaimed joyfully. I'll gladly pay for this. I wasn't getting anywhere with browsing for stuff, but I think I finally found something worth the trip. So how much would you take for it? Nothing, the figure said, smiling through her cloak. More so than before, from the house without warning, she took out what seemed to be a wand and positioned it towards Akko in a flash. White swirls headed towards Akko's point of view and passed by her head, freezing the girl on the spot and staring towards the figure. Akko's eyes began to feel heavy and her body weak, as she collapsed down on her knees before landing face first on the floor, now fast asleep. The cloaked girl walked up towards her proudly as her accomplishment, as the ring started to fade away on Akko's finger and leaving behind a glow that covered her body before fading out completely. Out like the light, she said with a cheerful tone. The ring is placed and the amnesia spell should wipe out the memories of our encounter. Glad the magic battery in my wand still had some juice left after all this time. She picked Akko off the floor and carried her out of the empty store. If anyone was watching, which to her luck wasn't the case. She placed Akko on the ground away from the store and headed back in to go through the stock room, where there was a secret panel on the floor that leads to an underground exit. I hope Luna Nova is ready for the antics that'll ensue, the figure said excitedly with a giggle, as she walked. Make me proud, Akko. Show the school what you'll soon be made of. A few minutes later, Akko eventually started to awaken, as her eyes slowly gained vision. A few moments after getting her bearings, she realized she was lying on the ground with drool on her mouth from sleeping. She wondered, as she picked herself up, what am I doing here? I don't remember stopping for a nap, and not in the middle of the street anyway. She looked around to figure out what was going on, until something important. Oh crap, she cried out loud. Lottie and Susie, how long have I been out like this? I got to get back fast. She darted off in the opposite direction from the cloaked figure's store as quickly as she could reunite with them. If they had already left to return to the school, she'd be without a ride home, and she was not willing to go through waiting for a taxi. It wouldn't take her long to get back though, as from the second she turned the corner to where a nearby bench was, she collided into Lottie, who had been looking around for her. They both fell to the ground and were soon rubbing their foreheads from the impact. I'll watch where you're going, Akko said, not knowing who she'd bumped into yet. I'm not in the mood for getting amnesia. It's me, Lottie said with a groan which shocked Akko immediately. Oh my gosh, Lottie, she cried with worry. I'm so sorry. Are you okay? I'll be alright, she replied, getting back up on her feet thanks to Akko lending her hand to her. At least I found you. You were gone for a while and I was getting worried. Sorry about that, Akko said, feeling bad, but I'm not even sure why I'm this late. What do you mean? It's the weirdest thing. I was on my way back to meet up with you and Susie after realizing the time and I jogged it, but then the next thing I know, I wake up lying on the ground you were. How odd. Are you feeling ill or anything? I don't think so, Akko replied, putting her hand against her forehead. If I were feeling under the weather then I would have known about it. I suppose I have been feeling pretty tired though from how busy school work has been. Classes have been busier than usual this week and you've been training with Professor Ursula, so maybe it's just all caught up with you. Maybe? Akko didn't know what to think at this point. Anyway, we should get back to our dorm. I take it Susie's already gone? Yeah, she got a little impatient. Hopefully, she's not too annoyed now. I just feel bad, Akko sighed with her head down. I'm sure you had the intention of meeting up on time, Lottie said, trying to make her feel a little better. She'll understand with Susie, who knows? I'm sure it'll be fine. Come on then, Akko. I'll get us back. Akko was glad to have a friend like Lottie. She'd get herself and her friends into trouble more times than necessary and sometimes irritate them, but Lottie never gave up on Akko despite all of that. Not a lot of students had the patience to put up with Akko, so Lottie was one of few who could. Hopping onto the back of Lottie's broom, the two flew off back to Luna Nova, feeling hungry on the way. Both were hoping tonight's dinner would be one to fill their stomachs. But throughout the ride home, Akko continued to question to herself deep down what could have caused her to conk out on the street. Weird, Susie said sometime after Akko and Lottie had returned and explained what happened after much apologizing from Akko, to which Susie's response was as deadpan as usual. Considering that you often sleep in class, that doesn't sound too unusual at all. I wouldn't do that out in the street, though, Akko replied. As I said, maybe you're just exhausted from the amount of work we've been doing lately. Followed. If that's the case then just about everybody else should be tired, Susie said. I've been fine. What about you, Lottie? Akko asked, hoping she wasn't alone on this. Mentally drained maybe, but not tired at all. But someone else in our classes might have been tired too. They all looked fine to me, Susie said, as she continued to work on her potions at the desk. This is really starting to bother me, Akko whined. Well, the important thing is that you're okay and still here, Lottie said. Perhaps you did just get tired without realizing it. All this thinking is doing that for me. Akko planted her face on her bed pillow, looking grumpy. Why don't we just forget about it for now and go and grab some dinner shortly? Lottie suggested. Perhaps having an early night tonight may help. No arguments here, Susie said, which alerted Akko immediately. What does that mean? She asked with an irritated look on her face. Let's just go and get our dinner now, Lottie said nervously, hoping to avoid any potential arguments. She left the room first, with Akko following behind soon after, looking back at Susie annoyingly. The two would often get into little arguments from time to time, but despite that, they remained friends regardless. Akko drifted off an hour or so after dinner, snoring away within the first 10 minutes of sleep. As she slept, Lottie walked on over to Susie and talked with her quietly. I'm a little concerned about Akko. Maybe it's best we keep an eye on her tomorrow just in case. I don't think there's a lot to worry about, Susie responded. It's probably nothing more than her just snoozing off, but from how she described it, it must have happened in an instant. What if something else happened during the time she was sleeping? To Akko it would be instant, but who knows how long it went on for, and the reasoning for it fine, Susie agreed. It's probably nothing, but I'll keep watch too. Thank you, Susie. Lottie smiled. I just hope she's alright. As the hours passed and all three girls were fast asleep in their beds, faint sounds of jingling could be heard in the room. The source of the noise wasn't in sight yet, but it wouldn't be the only thing to happen as the night continued. After two making her unexpected entrance, the sound of snoring was the first thing heard by Lottie the next morning, which was always but a pleasant noise to be woken up to, she'd think sarcastically. Rubbing her eyes and equipping her glasses, she noticed that snoring wasn't the only thing to be heard. Faint jingling noises could be heard every few seconds too, which seemed to be coming from below her bed. Lottie turned to find Susie already up and dressed and was looking towards her. I think I've found the solution to why Akko must have passed out on the street yesterday, she said with the usual half-open-eyed look on her face. You have? Then that noise must be coming from. She has to be a sleepwalker. Wondering what she meant, Lottie looked down at Akko's bed to find her still fast asleep. But that wasn't what made her stop and question what she was looking at. Akko wasn't in her pajamas, as she normally would be. Instead, she appeared to be wearing what seemed to be a jester's motley. A hat with a white zigzag pattern for the bottom with red and yellow colors for the dangling sleeves sat on her head perfectly. Below a white zigzag-shaped neckpiece was a dress with red and yellow colors which had splits near the lower half and white showing at the bottom of it, and puffy sleeves with one red and the other yellow, followed by white zigzag flaps below them. On her arms were elbow-length arm gloves, both the same red and yellow color scheme as the rest of the outfit, followed up by knee-length boots that curled at the tips, one boot red and the other yellow with white zigzag-shaped flaps at the top. Many jingling bells were all around the outfit, from the dangling sleeves of the hat, the tips of the zigzag-shaped neckpiece, sleeves and boots, the splits of her dress, and lately the tips of her boots. Lottie was a little lost for words and raised an eyebrow. She put on her glasses, climbed down from her bed and stood up staring down at Akko, still in total confusion. Where did this come from? Did she use the clothes transformation spell on herself somehow? Doubtful. She's never tried that one yet, Susie followed. Unless she brought something from the costume shop yesterday, but she had nothing on her when I found her. Unless she used an object transformation spell to shrink the outfit into her pocket or something. But she's nowhere close to nailing that spell. Well, I'm stumped, Susie said, as she turned around. I'm heading off to the cafeteria. Breakfast is calling. Don't you want to wait for us first? Akko could wake up at any moment with snoring like that. She'll be a while. You may as well come along. You go on ahead, Lottie said, turning her eye contact towards Susie. I'm gonna stay and keep a check on Akko. I'm a little bit concerned about this. Sure. Feel free to fill me in if you find out anything. Got it, Lottie nodded as Susie left the room. Turning back to look at Akko, she sat down at her desk and waited. It took some time for Akko to finally awaken, much to the mercy of Lottie's ears from having to hear her snoring. Breakfast had already passed and her stomach was growling, but she'd said to herself that Akko was more important than that. Akko stretched her arms and legs, causing the bells on her outfit to jingle. something she wasn't aware of just yet. "Good morning, world," she said in a woozy voice, as she turned to notice Lottie watching her. "Oh, morning, Lottie," she smiled, rubbing her right hand against her face. "Did you sleep this time?" She noticed the jingling as well as the yellow arm glove. "What's this?" "That's the question I want to know," Lottie said, as Akko examined her clothing fully, with an appropriate jump of shock, as she banged her bed on Lottie's bed from above. "Careful!" Lottie cried. "Are you okay?" "What is going on here?" she cried, rubbing her head after the impact. "Whose idea was it to pull this prank during the night?" "Well, it wasn't Susie or me. I'd never pull this kind of prank on you, and I doubt she would either. The nerve of whoever's behind this," Akko said, rather angry and getting out her wand. "I'm not the fool of the school." She aimed her wand upwards, ready to perform a spell, only to stay in that pose and not budge. It took 5 seconds of motionless silence for Lottie to speak. "I don't think you know any clothes transformation spells, if I know what you're trying to do yet," Akko admitted, finally moving again. "I can do it for you," she offered, as she got her wand out. "Thanks, Lottie," Akko sighed with relief. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "No problem." She pointed her wand towards Akko and chanted the words Metamorphosis, the spell that could transform the user or another's clothes into anything of their desire. In the puff of smoke, Lottie waited to see if the spell did its job, but to her surprise, when the smoke cleared, Akko's jester attire still remained. "What the hell? Are you messing with me?" Akko asked in confused annoyance. "No, not at all. I don't understand why nothing happened." Lottie panicked nervously. "Maybe I didn't perform it correctly. Let me try again." She did so, with the panic of Akko's reaction in her mind almost breaking her concentration. The results were the same. Nothing had happened, which now caused Akko to panic a little. How about I try a spell on myself?" She shivered, as she tried to focus on something, raising her wand, once an idea came to her. "Metamorphosis," yes, she called out, which was the transformation spell Akko had been practicing with Professor Ursula. This time, though, was worse, as not even any magic was being produced from the wand. As Akko began to panic further, she tried other spells on herself, which all still did nothing. "This can't be," she said, feeling defeated. "What am I doing wrong?" Worried for her friend, Lottie tried more spells as well, all with the same results. "It's like you've become magic-proof," Lottie said, feeling at a standstill. "Now I'm starting to think something really did happen to you out yesterday." "But what? What would cause such a thing?" Akko asked angrily, as she attempted to remove the jester outfit by pulling at her arm gloves. Things only got worse from there, as it seemed that now she couldn't take it off. She pulled with all her might, as Lottie watched in surprise. Come on," Akko strained to the point of biting the top of the right glove with her teeth, only resulting in them digging into her skin and causing pain. "This is getting really weird," Lottie said, almost thunderstruck. "Try taking off the hat." Following her suggestion, Akko grabbed at the sleeves and pulled upwards to attempt removing it, resulting in the same outcome. The entire outfit couldn't be removed and seemed indestructible from how much Akko tried to tear the thing off. She collapsed to the floor with a loud jingle of her bells from pulling the hat sleeves from behind her head. She was lying down for several seconds, all out of options on what to do. "I can't do it," Akko said with a face of defeat. "Now what am I gonna do?" "Relax, Akko," Lottie responded, trying to stay calm for her sake. "I'm sure we can figure this out." "How though? None of our magic works on me, and this ridiculous costume isn't coming off." How am I supposed to go to classes looking like oh no? She cried out loud, looking at the clock. Classes in 5 minutes. Oh no, you're right. Lottie followed, realizing she hadn't changed out of her pajamas yet. We have to hurry and get going. I can't go to class looking like this. Akko panicked. Everyone's gonna laugh at me more than they already do, and I don't need to give them a bigger reason to do so. Not if we explain to the teachers what's going on. I'm sure they'll understand when they see for themselves, but the first lesson is with Professor Finnelan. Akko panicked, referring to the magic linguistics teacher whose other role was the faculty member in charge of student guidance. I don't want to get in detention for the umpteenth time. This time it's not my fault, as I said. If we explain what's happening, then she'll understand, Lottie told her, even though she too felt that Professor Finnelan would just see this as Akko not respecting school dress code. Besides, she thinks I have no value as a witch, and Finnelan was a serious woman who demanded respect and discipline from the students and favored skilled ones like Diana, which only made things harder for Akko, as Diana would tend to get under her skin for being treated as a joke to the school. Now that feeling would only be worse due to being trapped in this outfit. I'll be right with you, Lottie promised, placing her hand on Akko's shoulder. If she doesn't believe you, then I'll step in once again. Akko felt incredibly lucky to have Lottie as a friend. She sighed once more and gave a faint smile. Thank you, she said, keeping the response short and sweet, knowing that Lottie had to get dressed quickly. She turned to let Lottie dress whilst looking at her poster of Shiny Chariot, wondering what she would do if in a similar situation. Akko checked outside the bedroom door to see if any students were passing by heading to class, to which there were, as she hid away from their sight in case they were to take a look. Several of them thought they heard some jingling noises close by, but didn't give it much thought as they carried on. Lottie knew what Akko was trying to do, so she got in front of her and left the room, turning her head back to face Akko. I don't see anyone left, she whispered. If you want, then you can come on out. Maybe it's too early to do so. Akko smiled nervously with her eyes closed. You go on ahead and I'll catch up. We can't be late, Akko. I promise I'll be right with you, but then everyone will keep staring. Look at me, I'm dressed to be someone who is supposed to be laughed at. I get enough of that for just being myself, and not in a positive way. Then we'll both explain what's going on, if anyone asks. Come on, let's go. Once confident enough, Akko followed behind Lottie at a somewhat slow pace due to the bells on her outfit constantly jingling. With no way to remove them, her presence was bound to be heard by someone, which had her on edge as she walked down the hallway. Akko suddenly felt itchy on her back and groaned as she stopped in her tracks. Why now, she said, as she carefully moved her right arm to reach for the itchy area. I wanna scratch it so bad. Shall I do it for you? Lottie asked, who had noticed whoever does it, these bells will go off, she replied, scratching her gloved fingers across her back as carefully as possible, making the bells jingle louder. Just thinking of the very word, itch, caused more areas of her body to need scratching, being her arms and legs. She clenched her teeth in frustration as the itching continued and the stress of the bells giving her away. Try and stay calm, Akko, Lottie said quietly. You're probably not as itchy as you may think. Don't say that word, Akko responded back in a panic, as she felt worse. She began to feel flustered as she scratched faster and faster. Her eyes were closed tight and she was straining the further she scratched, not noticing that her left leg somehow stepped on the curl tip of her right yellow-colored boot. Moving forward at the same time, She lost balance and collapsed onto the floor, causing the bells to jingle loudly all at once from the fall. Lottie gasped and reached her hand out towards Akko for her to pick her back up with. The frustrated girl got back up on her feet and realized the noise she had made. Stuck in a pause of not knowing what to do now. Stupid boots, Akko cried out crossly, stomping her left foot down in repetition. Stupid bells. Hugwats with the jet laughed someone from behind her, which froze Akko in a fright. She quickly turned around to notice Barbara Parker, who was with Hannah England, two students who were loyal friends and assistants of Diana. The two of them had similar mocking behaviors towards Akko and her friends, especially Akko due to her incompetence in magic and her academic level in the school. Being brought down by them weekly was something Akko couldn't stand, and being in her current situation was only going to feed them with opportunities to make her feel worse. So you finally accepted that you're nothing but a joke to Luna Nova, Hannah commented on her attire. What took you so long? Akko replied back angrily, I didn't want to be in this situation. Made a bet with someone and lost it? Barbara asked with a sly, bullish smile. Of course you'd lose it. I'd say this actually suits you well. Hannah chuckled in an antagonizing manner. It really does. Scream you. Knock it off, Lottie said, getting in front of Akko. Something's happened to her and there seems to be no way of finding out what it is yet. I can answer it for you, Barbara said. Akko is nothing more but this school's clown and she secretly has accepted it. No, I haven't. Shut up, Akko cried angrily. It was enough to be in this silly outfit, but being called the school's clown had insulted her greatly. You try being stuck in this and see how I feel. No thanks. We prefer a dress code that shows we take things seriously, Hannah replied in a mocking tone. We'll be on our way now. I'm sure you'll need time to come up with some jokes, if you're even capable of making any good ones. Barbara chuckled alongside Hannah, as they set off past Akko and Lottie to head for class. The frustrated Akko suddenly realized that them going on ahead could mean them telling Professor Finnelan, which caused her to panic. Hold up, she cried, running on ahead, only to then step on the same curved boot tip again and fall. The sound of Hannah and Barbara laughing getting fainter only frustrated Akko more, as she got herself back up and attempted to chase after them again. More students were beginning to appear from far behind her, all noticing Akko's jet and questioning to themselves what was going on. Lottie looked back quickly, sighed, then turned to catch up with Akko in the hopes of getting her to calm down. Don't let them get under your skin, she said, placing her hand on Akko's shoulder, which caused her to stop. You're only going to make things worse for yourself, and let them go on ahead to tell the teacher. No way, she said somewhat anxiously. I'm not the school's clown. That comment's really hurt you, hasn't it? Kinda. Akko didn't want to fully admit it, but her silence was all the evidence Lottie needed to get the truth. We're almost at class now, so let's just carry on and explain what's happened. No need, Akko sighed. No doubt those guys would have told Professor Finnelan by now. Akko walked on forward, her head looking at the ground and arms dangling down with a look of defeat, as she approached the door. Other students from behind Lottie kept staring towards Akko and wondered what was going on. The second Akko walked into magic linguistics class, she noticed Susie was already at her desk, as well as Hannah and Barbara others, who both looked down at Akko for a brief second before she noticed. They eagerly awaited how the teacher would react to Akko's attire, with smiles on their faces. Professor Finnelan was at her desk watching everybody walk in and greeting them, and as to be expected, she took a look at Akko, still looking down at the ground, feeling completely embarrassed, and immediately a reaction came out. Miss Kaguri, she said in confusion, standing up from her seat. Just what on earth are you wearing? Wait, did Hannah and Barbara not tell her? Akko wondered, as she raised her head up slightly. Miss Kaguri Finneran asked again, raising her voice a little up. Answer me, young lady. Why aren't you in the proper dress code? I can explain. Go on then. You see, Akko paused, as she caught from the corner of her eye that everyone currently in the class continued to stare, including Diana, giving her that familiar look of disgust that she was more than used to. Lottie decided to step in, as she watched Akko struggle to break through her nerves. She woke up in this, Professor, she said. She can't get it off no matter how hard we try. That's right, Akko followed now with more confidence in her voice. It's stuck on tight. She pulled the sleeves on her hat hard to show she wasn't messing about, resulting in her falling over on her back, causing some of the other students to giggle, including Hannah and Barbara. I don't have time to deal with your foolish antics, said with her arms crossed, not looking convinced at all. But I'm not fooling around, I swear, says the fool, called Hannah from her desk, resulting in her and Barbara chuckling more. Akko, already tired of them mocking her again, looked directly at them angrily. Back off, she called to them. Fools are supposed to make us laugh, not threaten their audience. Barbara responded slyly. Shut up, we will. We're just waiting for a joke to come out of your mouth. Okay, that's it. Akko stomped up towards their desk with rage, as Lottie attempted to follow her in a panic. As Akko approached the girls, Hannah stuck her foot out to trip Akko over on the floor, something she had experienced from them in the past, as they laughed away. Well, you got the physical comedy down. Barbara laughed. But you couldn't have done that on your own. Akko got up and yelled out, as she grabbed Hannah and Barbara and pinned them down to the floor, resulting in all three of the girls fighting. Enough, called out Professor Finneran angrily, but her words didn't reach them as the fighting continued. Already growing tired of watching it, Diana stood up and got out her wand to perform a spell to stop the fighting. With a wave of it, she cast out a magical barrier spell around the three girls to protect them from more physical contact. That was except for Akko, as the spell didn't work on her. Hannah and Barbara looked up at Diana with much relief. Thanks, Diana, Hannah said with a relieved smile. Akko has no control over her temper. What would this school do without you? Barbara followed, but Diana gave them a look of disappointment. Akko was her main focus, as she continued to ponder why her spell didn't work on her. All three of you to the headmistress' office, now, Professor Finneran said angrily, as she pointed her finger towards the door. This instant Hannah and Barbara weren't so happy now, as they looked at Akko annoyingly before heading down the stairs with Akko, feeling defeated, walking close behind them. Lottie watched with worry, as her friend left the room, whilst Susie, who also watched, was wondering just what was going on with her fellow roommate. With the girls out of the room, the rest of the students sat at their desks except for Diana, as they conversed about what happened, mostly feeling that this was nothing new, as Akko's antics did make the most noise. Everyone please be silent, Finneran instructed. The lesson is about to commence. What happened has happened, so let's focus. Actually, Professor, Diana said, standing up from her desk, I hate to ask, but may I be excused for a moment? For what reason? Forgive me, but I seem to have forgotten the appropriate books for the class. May I quickly go back to my dorm room and collect them? That's rather unlike you to be unprepared, Fenelon responded surprisingly. I would usually expect you to be on the mark, but I suppose one can always make mistakes. I'll let you do so, but I do not expect this to happen again. It won't. Thank you and apologies, she said before leaving the room. With Fenelon believing her bluff, Diana took off in the opposite direction to head towards Miranda Holbrook's office, Luna Nova's 44th headmistress. Her spell not working on Akko had been bothering her since she stopped the fight, and she simply had to find out any traces of information, no matter how small. I am rather disappointed in you all, Holbrook said, having been told the whole situation. I do not expect fighting to be going on in class from any of you. She started it, though, Hannah said, putting on a distressed voice which instantly triggered Akko again. She and Barbara insulted me over and over again, Akko argued, pointing toward them, none of which should have happened at all. Holbrook said in her calm tone, I hope you realize this will mean detention for all three of you, but that's not fair, Barbara cried out in annoyance. Akko causes more trouble than anyone else here. That dumb outfit of hers couldn't be more befitting of such a disgrace. Do you want your detention to be extended? Holbrook asked, which stopped Barbara immediately. No, she sighed, then do not throw any more insults, thank you. You are to return to your class and come back here for your detention afterwards. Failure to show up on time will result in it being extended. Yes, Mrs. Holbrook replied disappointingly. As for you, Miss Caggery, she said, as Hannah and Barbara took their leave, stay here with me for a moment. Why, she asked nervously. Hannah and Barbara closed the door behind them, smiling as soon as they couldn't be seen. Maybe Akko's gonna get in bigger trouble. Hannah smiled. Attacking students will no doubt be a bigger price to pay, Barbara chuckled, as they walked away, quickly followed up by anger. She still got us in detention, though unbeknownst to them, as they left, was a tiny creature keeping itself hidden from them and everyone else, as it snuck through the open door of the office. A small chameleon with a face looking somewhat similar to Diana's was sticking to the wall, blending its colors with the surrounding environment and keeping out of sight. It kept its visual focus on Akko and the headmistress, wanting to learn more of what was being said. You mentioned something about this outfit of yours being stuck on you, Holbrook said. Show me an example, if you could, please. Oh yeah, Akko replied with a small glimpse of hope. If the headmistress could see the truth, the word may spread to others who didn't believe her, she hoped. She pulled against her hat sleeves as tight as she could, followed by trying to remove the gloves and boots, to no success. My magic doesn't work either, Mrs. Holbrook, she followed up by trying the transformation spell she'd been working on with Professor Ursula. She knew, though, it would be hard to convince the headmistress with it. However, she hadn't fully perfected it at this point. Well, I say, Holbrook said in surprise. I don't think I've seen something like this before. Lottie tried her magic on me too, and that didn't work either. Please, could you try one on me to help prove my point? Holbrook nodded immediately, as she stood up and performed the clothes transformation spell on her. She was shocked to discover that Akko was right. Nothing had happened. She tried other spells too, which lead to the same results. See? Akko said with a sad sigh. I'm stuck like this. I suppose this calls for some investigation, Holbrook said, sitting back at her desk. I'll inform Professor Ursula after first classes are finished and the rest of the staff. Thank you, Akko smiled with relief. This has been bothering me all morning. Everyone besides Lottie thought I've been messing around this whole time. I don't want this. At least now I can see why you're so frustrated. However, this doesn't mean you should have attacked Hannah and Barbara earlier. The best thing to do would have been to ignore them or report to the teacher that they were bullying you. I expect better from you, Akko. I know, she sighed. I'll try and make sure to not let it happen again. I should hope so. I'll return to class with you and explain the situation to Professor Finnelan. You will still be required to return for detention afterwards, though. Thank you so much, Akko said with a relieved smile, and I'll accept my punishment. As Akko and Hollow left the office, Diana, still in her chameleon transformation, followed closely behind them back to class. Never before had she snuck out of class like this, and deep down knew that it was possible for her to be sent to detention for taking so long to get her books, but for a situation such as this, she couldn't ignore it. Diana eventually diverted from them to find a place to hide and transform back to her normal self. Waiting for the headmistress to explain everything to Finland and leave, she returned back to class and explained she had them all along, resulting in avoiding any detention due to Finland's opinion of her as an inspiration to Luna Nova. As the class continued, though, she found it hard to focus, as not getting any answers to Akko's situation yet was constantly on her mind. 3. Assisted dancing. Word had slowly begun to spread around Luna Nova about Akko's current predicament from the students to the staff, and everyone had their own take on the matter. Some thought Akko was pulling a huge prank, whilst others were worried if they would be hit with this curse, as they called it. Akko wasn't used to being the talk of the school this much, and she wasn't exactly enjoying it either. She'd take any opportunity to get away from everybody minus her friends during breaks. She, Hannah and Barbara were sent to detention later on, after school hours were over, which involved doing cleanup around areas the New Moon Tower, something Akko was used to doing during past detentions. She said nothing to Hannah and Barbara, as the three girls worked, wanting to finish as quickly as possible so she could get away from them. Hannah and Barbara never spoke a word to anybody but each other throughout, occasionally grumbling about Akko behind her back. Akko retreated to the library after detention was over in the hopes that not many people would be in there studying. It seemed that only she and one other student in the far left were in there. She sat down at the desk and planted her head down with a deep sigh. If I have to look at anybody else staring at me awkwardly today, I think I'm gonna lose the ability to give eye contact to anyone, she groaned, as she rested her left cheek against the table. With only the sounds of her bells jingling with any slight movement, the library seemed quiet. She felt somewhat comfortable and began to close her eyes slowly, wanting to get the day over with without caring if she was in her bed or not. It wouldn't be long, however, until someone came over to her. Akko asked, a voice which would have been the final stretch for Akko were it not for who the voice belonged to. Professor Ursula, she asked, turning around feeling somewhat relieved. Ursula Callistus is the magic astrology teacher of Luna Nova, one of the youngest-looking teachers of the school, as well as a mentor for Akko. After her first encounter with Akko on a rather crazy first day, she'd be looking out for the young witch and tutoring her outside of school hours, as Akko struggled a lot with magic. How are you doing? Ursula asked, with her always carrying tone. Today must have been rather rough for you, right? Rough feels too tame of a word, Professor, Akko replied, sulking again. I feel so frustrated I can only imagine. But the school know what's going on now, so don't you worry. The state that you're in won't last long, I promise. I sure hope so. I look so ridiculous and humiliating deep down. Ursula thought her jester outfit looked somewhat cute on her but decided it was best to keep that to herself and focus on how it was making her feel. This case is rather unknown to many of us, but we'll be trying all we can to figuring out what the problem is. You may have to wait for a little while, but nobody is going to ridicule you for it except for Hannah and Barbara. Akko sighed, thinking back on the comment they made about her. Even after detention they probably still will keep calling me the clown of Luna Nova, but you know that you're not, Ursula assured her, so don't let those comments get to you. I'm trying not to, Professor, but with all the times I've screwed up before and how often they poke fun at me, being stuck in this costume really made it feel personal. I didn't mean to attack them, but I got so angry. Anger does make us do things we don't mean, as you know. You shouldn't have done it at all, but I can somewhat understand the frustration that leads you to it. Just know that violence will solve nothing. Always think before you act, okay? You're not a violent girl, and I know you aren't. Akko turned around to face Ursula after a moment of silence. She smiled a little, knowing that Ursula was always there for her no matter the situation. If there was anyone she felt she could talk to, it was her. Thank you, she said with a small glimmer of hope. Only ask if I could get in some practice for my transformation spell, but you already know not a problem. We could spend extra time working on it once we get you out of that costume to make up for any time we don't get. Sounds good, Professor. But what can I do instead? Without getting any tutoring from you, I'm a little unsure of what to do with myself. Well, I was planning on cleaning up my room before I relax for the rest of the night. You're more than welcome to come along and assist me, if you like. You won't have to worry about getting any looks from others. If you're still worried about that, I think I'll take you up on that offer. Akko agreed, who would not usually want to do any more cleaning if she was made to do any in detention. Having not long finished cleaning earlier, she thought she might as well continue doing some more to keep her mind focused on something else. Doing it for Ursula sounded a lot more satisfying too. They both left the library and set off to do just that. After stopping by Akko's room to inform Susie and Lottie where she would be elsewhere, Hannah and Barbara were hanging around the courtyard alone, feeling that they couldn't face Diana yet after her disapproved look from the incident with Akko. They were taking the time to moan about detention and Akko in general. I never want to get in detention again, Barbara grumbled, thinking about all the cleaning they did. Akko should have accepted her title and gone with it, but no, she had to lash out and we end up doing her dirty work. All this is probably some big trick set up by Akko, Hannah said, as the girls parked down on a nearby bench. Make everyone feel sorry for her, while we will start getting all the hate. It'll probably end up that way the more that everyone is told about Akko being in some kind of curse. She's totally faking it. The last thing I'd want is for that clown to get away with all this. She's been nothing but an eyesore ever since she came to this school and made little to no progress. Why do they insist on keeping her? Hannah asked herself frustratingly. Somebody's probably looking out for her, and my hunch is that it's Professor Ursula. She's usually with Akko more than any other student. Then maybe the staff need to open their eyes more. Akko's got no right trying to be a witch. Maybe, if she were to fully accept what she's better at, this her current case, being a fool, maybe she'd get the right idea and leave. The school would be so much better off. The girls thought about something for a while. If the staff had no intention of considering expelling Akko, then maybe, they thought, a little push might be what could make it possible. Perhaps it's about time somebody else tried to make the message clear, Hannah said with a smile. Someone who can see clearly what Akko is supposed to really be thinking on the same wavelength? Hannah asked, looking towards her best friend. Yet, I think I'm. Barbara nodded with confidence. Frustration towards Akko was at the forefront of their minds. It was about time, they thought, to plant the seeds towards Akko's future. As several days passed by, Akko tried and carried on school life normally despite the circumstances. It proved to be rather tricky, as nervousness and frustration from the reactions of her class peers and jingling of her bells interrupting class respectively were emotions Akko went through most of the time. Lottie and Susie made sure to stick by Akko at the request of Ursula, who wanted to make sure she always had someone around to converse with to take her mind off the outfit. Whilst the stares from other students never fully went away, having her friends around to help to distract Akko from always feeling uncomfortable passing by the hallway one day to go outside for first break, Akko, Lottie and Susie were discussing the results of their chemistry class when coming up towards them were Anna and Barbara, who pretended not to look at Akko in company. Give them no eye contact, Lottie whispered. The quicker we pass by them, the better. No doubt they'll just give you hell the moment you do, so maybe look at the ground or something, Susie suggested. Okay, Akko replied with a faint smile. I know better now than to give them any attention. I'm not gonna make the same mistake again. As before, they didn't notice, however, from looking away from at the two, that Hannah and Barbara were getting their wands out and pointing them towards their noses. With them both casting out a magical chant at the same time, a puff of smoke appeared in front of their faces and faded away to reveal big red rubber clown noses. They looked towards Akko and smiled. Hey there, Hannah called out with a fake smile. How it's going, Jess? Barbara asked, as she and Hannah both squeezed their noses to make them honk. Akko immediately looked at them. Their plan to get her to notice them had worked. What happened to you two? She asked, not realizing yet their true intentions with this. Did you get stung multiple times? Not at all, Barbara smiled. We just want to fit in with the crowd, the girls both said, followed up by them both laughing. Hey, knock it off you two, Lottie said angrily, already forgetting to ignore them. Come on, Akko, tell us a joke, Hannah teased. Surely by now, you've thought of some up, Susie said to herself, as Akko then picked up on the purpose of this. She lowered her eyebrows and clenched her teeth, trying to hold back from shouting at them. We'll be on our way, she said, starting to walk off. Oh, why not stick around? Hannah called out to Akko. We could come up with some great jokes together, maybe even put on an act for the school. Come on, consider it, Barbara called back. We understand you fully now, let's go, Susie said to Lottie, as she walked away from the girls also, with Lottie eventually doing the same, looking back at them annoyingly. Proud of themselves, they turned their noses back to normal and walked off in the opposite direction, laughing and headed towards their room to discuss a plan they had in mind. You did well, Akko, Lottie said, feeling ashamed of herself. Better than how I handled it. It's all right. They almost got under my skin, worse than they did for you, she replied, eventually calming herself down. I just got to ignore them, She walked on ahead, feeling a little down. Once again the clown remark had gotten to her, and this time she didn't want to openly admit it for the sake of her friends. The following morning before sunrise, Hannah and Barbara were sneaking through the corridors quietly. They'd used an invisibility spell to keep out of sight and were carrying 2 sets of wood each with small holes planted around them. Hannah's set was made up of 2 rectangular-shaped planks nailed in the middle together, one bigger than the other, whilst Barbara's were 2 separate single planks. Arriving outside the door of Akko, Lottie and Susie's room, Hannah peeped through the keyhole to see if they were all still asleep, to which they were. Giving Barbara a head nod to confirm it, she quietly opened the door slowly enough to not be heard and took out her wand. This should keep them quiet for a while, she whispered with a grin, as she and Barbara cast out the words, Torururura sleeping spell. They aimed towards the 3 sleeping girls. Bubbly clouds appeared over their heads, resulting in them falling into a deeper sleep than normal at this hour. Akko was soaring the loudest of the 3, a clear sign that the spell was a success. Nice going, Barbara commented, as she walked into the room alongside Hannah. Think the potion we drank will make it last long though? We haven't exactly mastered the spell yet. It should be long enough to prepare our actor for the show. So let's get to it. Hannah and Barbara both stared at the sleeping Akko with cheeky grins, as Barbara took out a ball of string and scissors. A good jester should always entertain its audience, she chuckled, as the girls set to work. Hannah took Akko out of her bed and held her up against the wall whilst Barbara measured out and cut several lines of string using an object control spell. Girls tied the strings through the open holes of their planks of wood and tied the other ends to various areas of Akko's body. The strings from Hannah's wooden planks attached to her arms from above her elbows and her wrists, around her waist for the back, slightly above the knees and around her feet, and finally one string through her hat which Hannah threaded through. Barbara's meanwhile tied onto each of Akko's individual fingers. To cap it off, they pulled her eyes open and placed clear sellotape on her face to keep them open. Our marionette is ready, Barbara said with excitement. Better get in a quick test run before we take her outside, Hannah suggested, as she used her wand to manipulate the strings on her controllers that operated Akko's arms, which were dangling up to the lower level of her head. The string for her right wrist moved up and down to make Akko wave at the girls. Hannah then focused on her second controller used for control of her legs alongside the first one, making her do a skipping motion on the spot whilst her arms moved around. Barbara then moved her controllers to make Akko's fingers move all around, which took quite a lot of focus. The girls then slowly make Akko sit down on the floor and cease their object control spell. Akko continued to snore away. I'd say we make a good team with this, Barbara said proudly, as I expected, Hannah responded with confidence. Assist me with carrying her out of here. Both taking hold of Akko from the front and back, they took her out and went down the 1 flight of stairs to drop her in the hallway. Hiding behind a corner, the effects of their invisibility spell wore off, as expected, knowing that they had still yet to master that one as well. It mattered not though, as they would use it again when it would be nearer the time that other students would be waking up. If they were going to embarrass Akko, they wanted to be sure she would have an audience watching her. So what do you want to do in the meantime? Barbara asked upon realizing that they didn't think about having to wait. I don't know. After half an hour of sitting there with nothing to do, they could wait no more, as they drank a second invisibility potion each and cast the appropriate spell to stay hidden from sight. Let's do this, they said together with a smirk, as they cast the object transformation spell on their controllers. Raising Akko up from the floor, They made her dance around the corridor with various leg bends, kicks and lots of floppy arm movements. The bells on her outfit jingled constantly and loudly enough to start gaining the attention of other girls opening their dorm room doors. They stood there watching her move around, stupefied and confused on an equal level. What's she doing? Practicing for a talent show, asked one light brown hair student still in her pajamas. No way that Atto would be doing this on her own, replied the other from the room next door. She's lucky enough to pull off any spell without it going wrong. Could you keep it down? Akko called a student from a few doors along, not having yet looked at what was going on, as she rubbed her eyes. Some of us may or may not have been up later than we should last night, and the girl went speechless as soon as she watched Akko dance around, unaware that she was still asleep due to seeing her from the back. I don't think she's blinked once, said the brown-haired girl. Got to hand it to her, that's pretty good, if she's trying to pull off acting like a puppet. Hannah and Barbara, still remaining out of sight, then made Akko turn to face the girl and walk up to her in a jerky motion. Using the control for her right hand, Hannah and Barbara worked together to make Akko's arm reach out and her fingers to grab hold of the girl, pulling her out of her room towards Akko and controlling her left arm. They made Akko hold on to the girl, as the strings made her dance, now with the student being pulled around as it happened. Hannah and Barbara, without really thinking about it, were pulling off some surprisingly impressive puppetry, especially being done with a real person. They continued to make Akko look like the fool they saw her as, with more students coming to see what was happening. It wouldn't take long until a familiar face began to approach the scene, as Diana, still in her dressing gown, had heard about a racket going on and came to investigate. She stopped in her tracks and stared blankly at Akko at the sight she was witnessing. Just what? Girls tied the strings through the open holes of their planks of wood and tied the other ends to various areas of Akko's body. The strings from Hannah's wooden planks attached to her arms from above her elbows and her wrists, around her waist for the back, slightly above the knees and around her feet, and finally one string through her hat, which Hannah threaded through. Barbara's meanwhile tied onto each of Akko's individual fingers. To cap it off, they pulled her eyes open and placed clear sellotape on her face to keep them open. Our marionette is ready, Barbara said with excitement. Better get in a quick test run before we take her outside, Hannah suggested, as she used her wand to manipulate the strings on her controllers that operated Akko's arms, which were dangling up to the lower level of her head. The string for her right wrist moved up and down to make Akko wave at the girls. Hannah then focused on her second controller, used for control of her legs alongside the first one, making her do a skipping motion on the spot whilst her arms moved around. Barbara then moved her controllers to make Akko's fingers move all around, which took quite a lot of focus. The girls then slowly make Akko sit down on the floor and cease their object control spell. Akko continued to snore away. I'd say we make a good team with this, Barbara said proudly. As I expected, Hannah responded with confidence. Assist me with carrying her out of here. Both taking hold of Akko from the front and back, they took her out and went down the one flight of stairs to drop her in the hallway. Hiding behind a corner, the effects of their invisibility spell wore off, as expected, knowing that they had still yet to master that one as well. It mattered not, though, as they would use it again when it would be nearer the time that other students would be waking up. If they were going to embarrass Akko, they wanted to be sure she would have an audience watching her. So what do you want to do in the meantime? Barbara asked upon realizing that they didn't think about having to wait. I don't know, after half an hour of sitting there with nothing to do, they could wait no more, as they drank a second invisibility potion each and cast the appropriate spell to stay hidden from sight. "Let's do this," they said together with a smirk, as they cast the object's transformation spell on their controllers. Raising Akko up from the floor, they made her dance around the corridor with various leg bends, kicks, and lots of floppy arm movements. The bells on her outfit jingled constantly and loudly enough to start gaining the attention of other girls opening their dorm room doors. They stood there watching her move around, stupefied and confused on an equal level. "What's she doing?" "Practicing for a talent show," asked one light brown hair student still in her pajamas. "No way that Akko would be doing this on her own," replied the other from the room next door. "She's lucky enough to pull off any spell without it going wrong." "Could you keep it down?" Akko called a student from a few doors along, not having yet looked at what was going on, as she rubbed her eyes. "Some of us may or may not have been up later than we should last night," and the girl went speechless as soon as she watched Akko dance around, unaware that she was still asleep due to seeing her from the back. "I don't think she's blinked once," said the brown-haired girl. "Got to hand it to her, that's pretty good, if she's trying to pull off acting like a puppet." Hannah and Barbara, still remaining out of sight, then made Akko turn to face the girl and walk up to her in a jerky motion. Using the control for her right hand, Hannah and Barbara worked together to make Akko's arm reach out and her fingers to grab hold of the girl, pulling her out of her room towards Akko and controlling her left arm. They made Akko hold onto the girl, as the strings made her dance, with the student being pulled around as it happened. Hannah and Barbara, without really thinking about it, were pulling off some surprisingly impressive puppetry, especially being done with a real person. They continued to make Akko look like the fool they saw her as. With more students coming to see what was happening, it wouldn't take long until a familiar face began to approach the scene, as Diana, still in her dressing gown, had heard about a racket going on and came to investigate. She stopped in her tracks and stared blankly at Akko. At the sight she was witnessing. "Just what in the world?" "Oh no," Barbara gasped as quietly as possible. "Diana's here. If she finds out we're behind this, then she'll give us one of those harsh stares again." "Why worry?" Hannah asked. "She doesn't even like Akko anyway, so don't threat." "I'm not sure." Barbara's doubts began to affect her focus, as the finger controls moved forward, pulling Akko towards Diana. "What are you doing?" Hannah cried, almost making her volume too loud. "I'm sorry, it was too late," as Akko collided into Diana, now with Hannah starting to fluster and lose her focus too. The strings made Akko wrap her arms around Diana and pull her back along with her, causing an extremely awkward moment for the school's most inspirational student. To make matters worse, the sleeping spell had run its course on Akko, as the feeling of having her eyes forced open was the first thing she noticed before her vision became clear. Noticing the web of strings surrounding her and in a cuddling position, Akko yelled out loud in horror, as did Diana on impulse. "What is going on?" Akko cried loud enough for the sellotape to come off. "You tell me first," Diana replied angrily, as Hannah and Barbara lost more control over Akko. The strings made her do a messy-looking dance with Diana still in her grasp, with Diana trying not to fall over, making her legs wobble around. That ended up looking like a dance. The finger strings made Akko push Diana on the spot, making her spin around on tiptoe and raising the levels of embarrassment. It was followed up by a messy-looking and unintentional Russian squat-looking dance, as Akko's legs kicked the spinning Diana away and made her crash onto a nearby wall not far away from where Hannah and Barbara were. Frozen with shock, they decided enough was enough after nearly screaming with fright from their idol getting messed around from their mistakes. With the invisibility spell on the verge of losing effect, they ran off as quickly as possible, causing the object control spell to stop at last. The marionette controls fell from the air and landed right on Akko's head, causing the girl to collapse to the floor feeling bruised and dizzy. By now the other students had already made themselves scarce, wanting to avoid the possible outrage from Diana. Akko sat herself up, rubbed her head, wondering why on earth she was a puppet, but Diana coming up to her halted that question. "Do you think this is all a game?" Diana asked, as her voice gradually got angrier. Akko moved back a little in fear, as Diana's face gradually reflected her tone of voice. "I'm starting to think that costume of yours seems quite fitting, because you are being a complete and utter fool, Diana. I don't know what's going on," I say, but Diana boomed. "My back hurts. I was close to hurling and you made me look as foolish as you. It's enough that you cause enough trouble, as it is, but doing so at this time in the morning is unacceptable. Listen to me, Diana," Akko begged. "This isn't what you think it is. I will not fall for a jester's tricks. Get yourself back into your room." Diana's anger was at the forefront, ignoring any sense of glee from the confused Akko, as she walked away. Akko watched her leave in silence, frustrated that she didn't get a chance to explain herself, even if she had no real answer to this. She examined the strings on herself and grew cross herself, getting up from the floor and stomping back to her dorm. "Whoever's behind this, I'm gonna give them a piece of my mind." Akko was so mad that she didn't even notice at this point that she didn't untie her strings, as they and the controls dragged across the floors and stairs. Akko called Lottie, who along with Susie arrived at the scene. Once Akko arrived back at the floor to the room. "There you are. What's going on?" "Someone messing with me, that's who. And I've got a pretty good idea who did it. It's pretty obvious who it is," Susie said, as Akko returned to her room to get the strings off, as the others followed to assist her. Hannah and Barbara meanwhile kept themselves hidden from anyone nearby and panicked on what to do now. Whilst they had succeeded in making Akko look silly, it was possible that it could have some big consequences that may make them regret going along with this plan. If their second attempt to make Akko look bad was going to work, they had to change their tactics.